Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman, and today I'm talking with Dr. Diane Mueller, who is a functional doctor and who is passionate about finding the root cause of her clients' chronic issues because she's also struggled with her own health. She co-founded a mindfulness-based functional medicine certification program so that other practitioners can be certified in advanced functional medicine and benefit from the most up-to-date research protocols. In today's episode, I'm talking with Dr. Diane about her own health issues and, of course, the link between those and sugar. So I'm here today with Dr. Diane, and can you tell me a little bit about what your life was like when you were still consuming sugar and didn't really know about the effects of sugar?
Absolutely. So, what's so interesting about this question is I was really fortunate when I was in high school and started running cross country to have this amazing coach who wasn't just training me for running, but really for life. So he was the first person that really started connecting like sugar and performance. So as coached by him, he was the one that was telling me about the effect of sugar on the body and like soda on the body. So this was ninth grade, I largely cut sugar out of my life. It did creep back in when I got to college, and a lot of my self-care mechanisms kind of fell by the wayside. But as soon as I was done with my undergrad, I got into naturopathic medical school. And that's when we started learning about how sugar actually will turn down white blood cell function, how sugar is super inflammatory to the body, how sugar will actually, mess with our metabolism, even if we're still eating the same number of calories, like all these different types of things I started learning. And so the biggest thing for me, as far as really getting sugar out of my life, was going to school and learning about the long-term physical, science rooted type of things with it. But I was super fortunate. As soon as I was able to really connect, like in high school, I eat sugar, I don't perform as well. That was the big light bulb for me that said, hey, I'm doing all this work to take good care of myself. I'm exercising, I'm doing all these great things. And then I could go home. And if the way my coach would say, it's like, you can go home and you can do all these good things all day. And then you have this piece of chocolate cake and it really sets you back and it really diminishes all the, the work and the effort. So I was super fortunate to actually have that programmed in high school by connecting the results of eating sugar to athletics and performance.
And can I ask, was it your coach that sort of helped you make that connection and not any kind of biology class or your doctor or anyone else?
Correct. Yeah. It was just like this amazing coach I had. He was amazing. He was the one that really got me running and, helped my athleticism, but he also was the one that helped with teaching me, if you eat this way, your body performs this way. If you eat a different way, your body performs a different way. He also got me into meditation and visualization. So it was a really well-rounded coach, especially for ninth grade. It was, I was very fortunate that way.
Wonderful. And wonderful that you got connected to that kind of outlook so young. And did that influence you in choosing to study it in naturopathic medicine, right?
Yeah. And so for some, in some level, for sure. Largely of how I got into naturopathic medicine was I started developing other symptoms that were non-sugar related. I had cleaned up my diet, everything was good. And I started developing health problems despite all that. So that was a huge part of what really got me into natural medicine. But prior to that, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I found myself drawn to reading books about diet, about nutrition. And so I spent about a year studying diet and nutrition prior to going to school. So kind of indirectly, I think the influence from him really helped shape me around, hey, there's something here and I want to learn more.
Cool. Yeah. Can I ask you what some of your symptoms were?
Oh my gosh, I had so many things. I had fibromyalgia, I had chronic fatigue syndrome, I had IBS. I used to have these headaches so bad. The way I would describe my headaches was like vice grips, like the tool. It was almost like somebody was taking vice grips and my head was in the vice in between, and they were just squeezing the vice grips as tight as they could. Just horrific headaches. Pain sometimes so bad that I would have to be carried up and down the stairs because I couldn't walk. So it was pretty out of control. And even though I was, eating really well at that time, I would definitely notice that if there's like certain things, like if I would eat out and I would encounter things like sugar and gluten, that would make my symptoms worse. So even though I was, 97% away from those kind of things, still allowing them to sneak in when I was so symptomatic was also a huge component of realizing the impact of those types of, dietary choices.
And had you gone to any kind of health professional about those symptoms?
I had, and all like the standard type of labs were run. And of course, all the standard type labs were basically normal. At one point I did have some high white blood cells that kept showing up, and some of what turned out to be, I had a lot of infections, but it was just so borderline high that it was just kind of written off as like, maybe you're just minorly fighting something, no big deal. And so nobody was really taking me seriously because all my lab tests were normal.
Yeah. And you were suffering all the same.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And eating, as you were saying, 97% clean, as it were. So do you consider that you're extra sensitive to sugar and gluten, or just normally sensitive?
I would consider that I'm normally sensitive now. Like now I'm like symptom free. I feel better in my body than I did. I'm in my 40s. I feel better in my body than I did in my 20s. So that's amazing. But like, so now I would say I'm regularly sensitive, but when I had a lot of symptoms, I would say extremely sensitive, where it's like, now it's like, okay, holiday time, like I'll cheat. I'll have a piece of pie with some sugar in it. And some gluten in it, like that sort of thing. But it's like, it's one of those things that it's like, it's just a cheat. And if I do it just as a cheat and it's not part of my, my daily, weekly life, I don't notice it. But back then when I was symptomatic, like a tiny little off, getting off the dietary plan it was horrific. So, my body's a lot more resilient. And as long as I'm doing the right thing, most of the time I find that I can get away with it, as long as it keeps to be like just a tiny little part of my life.
Yeah, I get that. I do that too. Yes, I totally get that. Yes. And so what decided you to go study naturopathic medicine rather than sort of mainstream medicine?
So largely based upon my own history, having so many different symptoms, like, it was so bad. At one point, I thought I was going to move to a deserted island. I was like, actually, trying to think about like, can I find a cheap hut someplace? Because I thought I was dying, like where can I live very, very cheaply until I die? And so it was really, and then like, it just kind of was like this voice that I heard, like my intuition one day around like, no, you're not dying. There's actually a reason for this. And so it's hugely motivated initially by honestly just trying to figure out what was going on with me. And I went that route because I had already done so many conventional type of tests and everything was normal. So I was really interested in finding different alternative approaches to medicine around what is going on when our standard lab tests are normal and we still feel, extremely ill like I did. So it was largely my own journey that got me there.
Yeah. And how did you find out that naturopathic medicine even existed? Because it's almost like, well, if regular medicine is saying to you, well, you're normal and you don't feel normal, I mean, how did you find out that there was an alternative path for you?
This is a fun story. So I didn't actually know about it at all. And I actually, when I first started to decide I wanted to do something in health, I decided, okay, well, I would do dietitian. I thought that was like, I would learn about nutrition and that sort of thing. And that's, that was more mainstream is what I knew. So I was in an organic chemistry class and we had to have partners for our lab. And it was kind of like one of those like left out because I was left without a lab partner in OChem. And it's it's kind of a hard class. And so it was a little bit disappointing to not have a partner. And then the second week of class, somebody had registered late and she walks in and she gets to be my partner. And so we're talking, at lab, and she happened to be in that class not because she was on the dietitian track, she was doing it as part of her pre-med for naturopathic medical school. So she told me all about it. And I went home and I researched it. And it turned out that because I had already been studying sciences, I had all of my pre-med stuff done. And I applied, I got in, and 3 months later, I was on the way.
Fantastic. So, where did you study?
So I did my first 2 years at Southwest College in Phoenix, Arizona. And then I wanted to add on the acupuncture program. So I transferred up to National University. It was National College back then in Portland, Oregon. So I could do both the doctorate in natural medicine and then get my acupuncture degree as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And so that term, natural medicine, that term makes me smile because, it's a bit like saying clean food. Natural whole food. We shouldn't have to specify that it's natural medicine. We should specify unnatural medicine. And so did you find that what you were learning was like a discovery for you?
Yeah, what was super interesting was how many like lab tests, for example, how many lab tests actually exist outside of what conventional medicine does. And, it's like gut health, right? It's like gut health, I think, is a perfect thing to talk about when we're talking about sugar, because we know sugar destroys the gut. And so when we're talking about gut health, like in conventional medicine, like a standard stool culture, for example, is only going to look for the really bad microorganisms. So you're going to, salmonella, E. coli, things people have heard of. But, one of the first things in like gastroenterology class was looking at what sort of things we look for from a functional natural perspective, which is like the list of microorganisms that can cause symptoms in the gut is so much broader and bigger than what's looked for in standard conventional stool cultures. So that was one of the first things that was kind of a light bulb for me, is when I started learning about all of these different tests that are so diagnostic, that are so research-based, that are, really validated for their accuracy, yet they're still not picked up yet by Western medicine because I kind of tell people it's like the symptoms these kind of bugs that we're talking about cause it can be just as bad, but you are maybe less likely to die from them. And so they haven't reached, the radar of conventional medicine yet because of that.
Yeah, they just make your life miserable, but you're not necessarily going to die.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's amazing to me. I mean, I'm in Canada where we have, what we consider to be a free healthcare system, although we do pay for it through our taxes, obviously. Yeah. It's a different type of system, but it seems to me that it's very similar in the sense that you go see, a conventional doctor and he'll run a whole bunch of tests. And if those tests come back so-called normal, there's sort of nowhere else for you to turn. It's like negating your personal experience. And knowing that there's functional medicine and naturopathic medicine that exists gives us patients, and for you as a doctor, that another way. But is it seen, do you find socially that naturopathic medicine or functional medicine is seen as an alternative medicine?
I think it's funny that it's seen as an alternative medicine, because in many ways it's like, I have to ask the question, right, around why is surgery a more like, hey, this is the thing we're going to do. We're going to remove a gallbladder. We're going to take out an organ, for example. So why is that not the alternative? Why? So these are really important questions, I think, because when we're dealing with like root cause type of medicine, where it's like somebody has rheumatoid arthritis and we're actually doing lab tests that don't just give them the label, we're actually saying, well, that's actually caused because you have toxic metals, or because you have intestinal permeability, leaky gut, or it's because of a parasite, or, all the other things that can cause these sorts of things. And I don't know why we're still stuck in this kind of old paradigm, where to me, it makes way more sense to say, well, let's do like the root cause, little side effect things first as like the primary medicine. And, and then have some of these like more potent drugs and surgeries around for the times that it doesn't work. But the times that it doesn't work, it's really there. It's pretty rare, it's pretty rare. And that should be the alternative when it's like, okay, people are in that 5% of the population or less, where it's like some of these root cause treatments are not working. Then maybe we go to drugs and surgery.
Oh, wow. Just want to take a quick break here to say that yes, there is an alternative to regular mainstream medicine. And that doesn't mean that that alternative is better, but just that it's complementary. And sometimes when we look at the alternative, we can actually save ourselves a lot of time and effort and money by looking at the root cause of our health issues before we go to medication or surgery. So I think Dr. Diane's approach and functional medicine in general, although its goal isn't to replace conventional medicine, it can actually help us patients ask the right questions. And that's why I find it so fascinating to talk to Dr. Diane, because she's empowering her patients to ask the right questions. And that's something that I've been teaching all my career as an English teacher and now as a sugar teacher. It really is empowering for us, patients and consumers and regular citizens, to feel like we're not helpless about our health anymore. And that's also why I created Life After Sugar. Because there's so much confusing information out there and so many experts, when in fact I believe that we ourselves are our own experts and we just need a little bit of guidance. And very, very often, cutting down or cutting out sugar, and even flour for many people like myself, means that we are less dependent on medication and surgery and medical interventions, because we've addressed at least part of the root cause of what's making us feel awful. So if that's something that's inspiring for you, then you can get more inspiration on my Facebook page, Life After Sugar, and on my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where I post pictures of what I eat and what I do, so that you can see that regular people like you and me can have a perfectly fun and active life even without sugar. You can also get more inspiration on my YouTube channel, that's Life After Sugar, as well as on my website, aftersugarclub.com, where you can go and download your 5 tips to help get rid of sugar cravings, and also my simple guide to getting more energy. When you sign up, I'll send you regular tips, recipes, and inspiration straight to your inbox, so that you never have to feel all on your own about living sugar-free or wanting to live sugar-free, because I'll be right there with you, sharing my real-life experience, so that you can also get to a place where you can say that you're living your life after sugar, which is basically living your life to the full, so that you can concentrate on all the other wonderful things in your life that don't contain sugar. Can you imagine that? All right, let's get back to my chat with Dr. Diane. And in your experience as a doctor, how empowered are the patients that you see for their own health?
It's all over the board. Honestly, there's some people that are so empowered and they're ready to take control over their lives. And it's one of the first, it's the most, say, easy predicting factor to somebody's wellness and to how fast treatment's going to go. So there's definitely tons of people that are, and I think it comes from being sick for so long. There's tons of people that do have kind of lost their own internal power around, okay, I still am responsible for making sure I move every day. And I'm still responsible for making sure, even if I can't move because I'm so sick, that I'm working on my mind, my mindset, and engaging the part of my nervous system that's the calm part of my nervous system, because that's frankly the part that's going to make us heal too, is engaging that. So, the ability of the individual to say, okay, this is natural medicine, is not a pill. We use supplements, but it's not this magical pill that's going to make and cover up symptoms and allow the disease process to still go behind the symptoms. We're actually getting to the root with this stuff, and it does take time. So I see it all over the board with like personal empowerment. There's some people that come in and they're like, whatever I have to do, like, I'm willing. I want to get well. I want to reverse this. I want to put in the time so that the rest of my life I can be healthy and well. And then there's other people that really have a hard time wrapping their brain around this. Getting well is oftentimes our number one priority. And it's, for anybody that's listening, this is like, I think really, really important, is that personal empowerment to say like, I'm going to show up to do this. I'm going to show up to heal myself. I'm going to show up to do the hard stuff no matter what. Because once we do that, we get to the other side, and then literally everything else in life gets easy once we're well. So we just have to get over that hump. And it's why in my practice, we talk a lot about mindset and the psychology of habit change. How do we make habits? How do we form habits that last? How do we change our mindset even when we're ill? All of these things are so important.
Yeah, totally. And it's all those things that I don't know about you, but no doctor ever talked to me about those things.
Yeah.
and nor did I learn those skills at school or anywhere else. And basically, we have to be our own advocates unless we can find a doctor like yourself that is on our side.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that, your own advocate. I definitely encourage everybody, like, if you've been hearing that you're normal, and you're not, something's wrong, and you're getting lab tests and they're saying that everything's fine, or if you've been told that it's all in your head. I have had so many patients tell me that it's all in their head, that they've been told that it's all in their head. And I have yet to find one patient that is true for. We run anybody that's been told that, we run tests for it. And when we find root cause, we find reasons. So sure, I'm sure there's like some possibilities of it being just purely a psychological thing, but I've yet to see that in anybody that's been put on like a antidepressant, any of these things. I always find reasons for why this is happening.
Yeah. Yes. And would you say that sugar, coming back to sugar,
yeah,
you say that sugar is like one major factor that is like across the board for people's symptoms or feeling unwell, or is it just for specific symptoms?
I mean, sugar in general is just, especially when we're talking about, our cane sugars, definitely our high fructose corn syrups, these types of sugars are particularly bad. I don't find that if people use, for example, like a small amount of xylitol or a small amount of coconut sugar or honey, a small amount of maple syrup, some of these more natural sugars in small amounts, there can be places for them. We do want to be really careful with those natural sugars, though, I find, is because for anybody that has that sugar addiction, which is usually that dopamine rush, right? It's like if you can have like a teaspoon of maple syrup, and don't find that, you're craving sugar and that's turning on this desire for the rest of the day, then you're great. But if you have like a small amount of sugar from one of these more healthy sugars like honey, and all of a sudden like your sweet tooth is like totally turned on, it's probably best to avoid. So in general, I find some of our more potent sugars, like our cane sugars, our high fructose corn syrups, those types of things really should be largely avoided almost all the time, except for these, these occasional special moments. And we just see that it's like sugar is like not only connected to obviously blood sugar changes and diabetes, but it's connected to, we know that like Alzheimer's, for example, is now considered like type 3 diabetes, right? So we're seeing that blood sugar affects brain health and brain function. We see that sugar actually will raise cholesterol, the bad cholesterol in our body. And so there's so many of these different links. So I really feel like beyond having symptoms, there's also just having a good, healthy diet to help with, anti-aging and make sure that we age gracefully as possibly and or as possible, and keeping sugar out, largely out, is a huge point, or huge helper for that.
Yeah, totally. And for me, it's also flour. I recognize that it's not the same for everyone else, but what you were describing of just having a little bit and then that triggers you to, for me, it triggers me to think about those types of foods. If I have a slice of bread, which I haven't had for months or years, or a slice of pizza, but I remember, when I do have those, as rare as those occasions are, that will set me off thinking about those foods and wanting more. And that's the flours, and they're not even sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we need to remember that carbohydrates still break down to, two simple sugars in our body. So it's not going to be as quite of a bolus to our blood sugar, because most grains have fiber in them, which will slow down the rate of absorption. So we don't tend to get the level of blood sugar spike the same way as like a concentrated sugar. But absolutely, it still breaks down in sugar. It can still trigger that dopamine type of desire and response in the brain. So still can have a, major impact. And I find that some people do really well. Like, it is best for them to be 100% off grains. Other people, I find, especially from the gluten-free grains, like, a small amount of grains, small amount of rice and quinoa can actually really be a healthy thing for them. So, in my clinical experience, I've seen the non-gluten grains really vary from like person to person around what their unique body needs. And that is often trial and error, but we really want to make sure that it's not the central focal point of our diets, even if we are consuming those kind of things.
And even if we're told to eat them in a food pyramid or a healthy plate.
Yes, exactly.
That comes back again to, like, who do we listen to? Because it seems to me the official advice that we're getting wherever we are in the world, the conclusion I came to was, I need to ignore the official advice.
Yeah, I mean, the food pyramid is definitely out. That is really a major problem. And in the end, I think one of the problems is, it's like, even when we're looking at these, these dietary plans, keto and paleo and autoimmune paleo and Mediterranean, all these different dietary plans that have been studied for various things. And, keto tends to be really good for brain health, and paleo tends to be really good for autoimmune situations, especially if we're doing an autoimmune type of paleo. So there's lots of different research behind these things. And sometimes I find that people will come to the office and they'll be so like attached to this one particular diet because they read, all of this blog on it, or they'll be confused, like you've said. And in the end, I do feel like everybody is unique. We see research saying that keto is great and research saying paleo is great, because they're both great for different people at different times in their lives. And this is why, having some of these more deep blood workups and specimen workups to really see, nutrient imbalances, to see if there's toxicity levels, to see what blood sugar, actually is. And there's earlier markers of blood sugar abnormalities than just fasting glucose and hemoglobin A1C. There's things like fasting insulin or HOMO-IR. That can tell us earlier than conventional studies or conventional lab tests. So when we do more of these types of root cause individual lab tests, I think that, that's when we can kind of get away from this, like, it's so crazy, who do I listen to? There's so much research out there, because then we can say, okay, because of the uniqueness of, the individual, let's prescribe the nutrition plan that makes most sense for you, not based upon all these, conflicting things we read.
Yes, because it really is confusing when it trickles down to a simple consumer like myself, know, and I had no knowledge whatsoever. I consider I'm still, not that knowledgeable about nutrition, but just knowledgeable enough in critical thinking.
Yeah, which is huge. That critical thinking factor around reading something and this doesn't sound right, or why is this conflicting? I mean, that's already a huge advantage, I think, over how a lot of people are reading things.
Yes, yes. And it seems to me that um, does the sort of so-called alternative, it's not alternative, it should be mainstream medicine that you practice, is that more expensive, or is it somehow more difficult to get to for regular people in the United States, say?
It depends upon how you define expensive. So, kind of to bring this like full circle, I think we need to look at what we're spending money on from a medical perspective, really long term. So, for example, I had somebody that was, thinking about coming and seeing me as a patient. I was working with his wife, and she was trying to get him in, and he was just not getting over that hump of trying something different. So I did have one conversation with him. He said he still wanted to go the conventional route. And that particular year, his wife told me at the end of that year that her husband, this potential patient, had two open heart surgeries, had a carpal tunnel surgery, and had two hip replacements. And on top of what insurance paid, he had about $100,000 out of pocket bill after that year on top of that.
Good grief.
So yes, like doing some of this natural stuff, insurance doesn't cover a lot of it. We do get some labs run through insurance, and when we can use insurance, we absolutely want to. But, the average person is, oftentimes spends, in the thousands, in order to get well. And we're talking about thousands versus 100,000. It's one of those things. It's like putting money into the stock market in many ways. It's like, into your safe funds, into your index funds that are not going to be very risky and that sort of thing. And it's like, well, that's money I don't have now, but it's money, but that's going to like triple what it's worth. And so in some ways, like, yeah, it's, it is out of pocket, and it is a paradigm shift from what we're used to doing in the United States, because, most of us have healthcare. So it is a shift. But if you look at it if like we don't fix these things, insurance isn't going to cover everything anyways. So if you look at it from that lens, it's actually one of the best investments and one of the, best returns on investments that we could possibly have.
Yes, yeah, I agree. And do most or all states have functional doctors or naturopathic doctors that practice in each state?
Largely you can find naturopathic doctors and functional doctors in most states. It can vary from state to state, and definitely some cities that are more kind of out in the middle of nowhere can be more difficult. So like in my office, we do telemedicine. So we see people all around the country, and actually even some people international as well. So the cool thing with where telemedicine's at now is that even if, you don't have access to somebody locally, it's pretty easy at this point to still get help.
Yeah, amazing. Yes. And can you tell people how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are accepting patients. My clinic is called Medicine with Heart. So it's just medicinewithheart.com. We do also have an online school in functional medicine where we train and certify docs and clinicians around the world in a mind-body approach to functional medicine. So that school can be found at mindbodyfunctionalmedicine.com. And then are we doing that giveaway for your listeners we talked about as well? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So one of the things that I had wanted to give you guys is I have an online course. It's called Hack Your Mind. And in this course, we go through a lot of the research on how to use the mind to gain more parasympathetic control over the body. What this basically means is that we have a couple different ways our nervous system is set up to send messaging. One is like that fight or flight. The other is like that rest and digest. And most people, when they're not feeling well, are in fight or flight. The problem with that is that when we're in fight or flight, we're not sending the messages to the body that say heal and repair. That's the parasympathetic. And there's a lot of research that's shown by working with the mind, we can actually re-engage this rest, digest, heal part of our nervous system. So it's not to say that things are coming from the mind, definitely not saying that. What we're saying is that the mind is one of the most powerful tools we have in order to get people well. And so we're actually utilizing the research that is showing techniques on how to get the parasympathetic nervous system on track to send that healing response. So normally this course is $297. We're giving it to your listeners for free.
Yeah, well, to the listeners that are in the After Sugar Club in my membership, yeah, totally. It's going to be available right in there. So thank you. That's
Perfect.
very generous of you. And
Yeah, happy
really,
to.
I think we underestimate the power of that mind-gut connection of how, just how our physical body affects our mind and vice versa. So that's
Absolutely.
a very valuable gift. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I think it'll pair very, very nicely with your program. So, like you're saying, we got to work on the mind, we got to work on the body. When we work on them both, that's where that just makes everything so much more powerful.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much for talking to me today. And, functional medicine changed my life.
Yeah, it's a wonderful medicine. I'm so glad that you've had good experience with it too. And thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you to Dr. Diane for such a great chat, and also for bringing functional medicine into our chat today, because functional medicine changed my life. The approach of it changed my life, because when I used to go see my regular doctor, who I still see obviously, I would come along with some symptoms. He would ask me questions about my symptoms, and then with his knowledge, which I deeply respect, he would send me either to another specialist that knew more about those particular symptoms, or he would offer me some kind of medication or treatment. And I take my chronic constipation as an example, because what the doctor offered me was advice to eat more fiber. And then when that didn't really help, I asked for a colonoscopy, which he agreed to, and that came back normal. And then he wrote me a prescription for laxatives, and that took care of the symptoms, but it didn't really take care of the root cause of why I was constipated. And that is what functional medicine is all about. It's a biology-based approach that focuses on identifying and addressing the root cause of disease or dysfunction, be it physical, like inflammation, or in my case, constipation, or psychological or mental, like, say, depression. And I'm certainly not saying that conventional medicine has no value, on the contrary. But in my experience, it did seem to focus on the symptoms more than on the root cause. And we could say the very same thing about sugar. If we look at the symptoms that sugar causes, like, for example, type 2 diabetes, we can treat the symptoms of diabetes with medication, or insulin, metformin, and continue eating pretty much what we did before. Or we can treat the root cause of the diabetes, which in many cases is dietary related and specifically sugar related. What if cutting out sugar actually addressed the main root cause of diabetes? It sounds simple enough, and I do recognize that it's more complex than that, but still, that's the approach of functional medicine, and although I'm no doctor, functional or otherwise, it's also the approach of life after sugar, which is to get to the root cause of your relationship with sugar, of why you crave it, why you feel you need it, and how life can be when you're free from it. And that's why I'm inviting you to join us for support, guidance, and accountability in the After Sugar Club, which is our monthly membership where we have regular check-in calls for support on Zoom, a friendly, active community where you can be with others who are on the same path as you to really getting to the heart of your relationship with sugar and to break free from this hold that sugar has on so many of us, so that you can live your life with more confidence and energy and stop obsessing about food and sugar, so that you can use your energy to live your life to the full. And in the After Sugar Club, you'll also get free access to Dr. Diane's course that she talked about. So go to aftersugarclub.com/club and join us today. And if you're enjoying this episode and you're finding that this podcast is helping you in your path towards freedom from sugar, then please rate the podcast and scroll down and leave a review and let me know how this podcast is inspiring you in your life after sugar. And don't forget to subscribe so that the podcast appears magically in your podcast player every Sunday. Thank you for listening. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.